The email didn't look strange at first. Subject line: Final round interview, location update. I had been waiting for that message for 3 weeks, checking my inbox every hour like my future depended on it, because it did. I had left my previous job after a brutal downsizing. Savings were thinning, rent was due, and my mother's medical bills were quietly stacking up like an unspoken threat. This opportunity wasn't just a promotion, it was survival. When I opened the email, I read the location twice. Private beach, for PM. Dress light. CEO. I stared at the words for a long time. This wasn't a startup. This was a multi-million-dollar tech empire run by one of the most talked-about executives in the industry. Visionary. Ruthless. Brilliant. Headlines either praised her genius or criticized her unconventional leadership style. Her name was synonymous with power, and she wanted to interview me. On a beach? I almost didn't go, but desperation has a voice louder than pride. The beach was nearly empty when I arrived. Golden light spilled across the shoreline. Waves moved in steady rhythm. And then I saw her. She wasn't in a power suit. No boardroom. No assistant. Just sunglasses, barefoot in the sand, holding a tablet. Calm. Composed. Observing. "You're late," she said without looking up. I checked my watch. I wasn't. But I didn't argue. She gestured toward the water. "Take off your shirt." I thought I misheard her. "I want to see how you handle discomfort," she said evenly. Leadership is exposure, vulnerability, pressure, sand in places you don't want it, sun in your eyes, no filters. Can you stand in that and still think clearly? My throat tightened. There was no one else around. Just ocean, sky, and the woman who controlled the job that could change my life. I hesitated. She didn't blink. "Most candidates walk away," she added. "They want climate control and bottled water. I want resilience." Something inside me shifted. Not humiliation. Not anger. Something deeper. A challenge. I removed my shirt. The wind hit my skin instantly. Cool. Raw. Uncomfortable. "Good," she said. Then she started asking questions. But they weren't about spreadsheets or revenue projections. She asked about the night my father passed away and I still showed up for a presentation the next morning. She asked about the time I defended a colleague who was blamed unfairly. She asked what I feared more, failure or irrelevance. The sun burned. Sweat rolled down my back. My chest tightened from the vulnerability of standing exposed while answering questions that cut deeper than any resume bullet point ever could. "Why do you want this job?" she asked finally. I could have said ambition, salary, growth. Instead I said, "Because I'm tired of surviving. I want to build something that matters." For the first time, she looked at me fully, and she smiled. "Most people want the title," she said softly. "You want impact." She turned off her tablet. "Walk with me." We walked along the shoreline in silence, waves brushing against our feet, the air heavy with something unspoken. "Do you feel embarrassed?" she asked. "Yes," I admitted. "Good. Ego is loudest when it feels exposed. Leaders who can't handle that destroy companies." She stopped walking. "You didn't complain. You didn't perform. You stayed present." There was a pause long enough to feel like a cliff edge. "You're hired." Just like that. No handshake. No contract. Just certainty in her voice. As I stood there holding my shirt in my hands, watching the ocean reflect the fading sun, I realized something. The interview was never about control. It was about stripping away pretense. And I had passed. But I had no idea that the real test hadn't even begun. If this opening chapter pulled you into the storm, don't forget to subscribe, because what happens next will challenge everything you think you know about power, ambition, and trust. My first day at headquarters felt surreal. Glass walls, ocean views, employees moving with sharp precision. And at the center of it all, her. She ran the company like a battlefield commander. Meetings were direct, decisions swift, weakness exposed instantly. Yet there was something different about the way she treated me. She watched, not in suspicion but in evaluation. Weeks passed. She assigned me impossible tasks, crisis negotiations, a product launch that was already failing, a hostile investor call where reputations were on the line. Each time she added pressure. Each time she observed how I handled it. One evening, long after most employees had left, she called me into her office. The city lights shimmered behind her like silent witnesses. "Why didn't you quit?" she asked. I blinked. Was I supposed to? She folded her hands. The beach wasn't about humiliation. It was about clarity. You'd be surprised how many executives crumble when their image is threatened. She stood and walked toward the window. When I built this company, no one took me seriously. I was underestimated, dismissed, questioned. I had to learn how to stand exposed in rooms full of doubt. Her voice softened, not weak, but honest. I needed someone who understood that resilience isn't loud. It's steady. Then she turned to face me. "I'm stepping back from operations next year." The words hit like a wave. I've been searching for someone who can eventually take this company further than I can. Silence filled the room. "You think that's me?" I asked carefully. She studied me the same way she had on that beach. "I don't think," she said. "I know." The realization settled heavily in my chest. The beach wasn't about making me feel small. It was about finding someone who wouldn't shrink under exposure. Over the next months, she mentored me personally. Strategy sessions turned into philosophical debates about power and responsibility. She pushed me, challenged me, dismantled my assumptions, and rebuilt them stronger. The board resisted the idea at first. I wasn't the obvious choice. Too young, too unconventional. But she stood firm. She handled pressure before she had power, she told them. That's rare. A year later, standing in the same building that once intimidated me, I accepted the role of COO. And on the anniversary of that beach interview, she handed me a small framed photo. It was the shoreline, empty, calm. "Never forget," she said. "Leadership begins where comfort ends." As she walked away from the company she built, I understood something profound. The world may judge by appearances, but true strength reveals itself when the spotlight feels unbearable. And sometimes, the strangest interviews become the turning points that define your life. The first time I sat at the head of the boardroom table, I understood something no one warns you about power. It's heavy. Not glamorous. Not triumphant. Heavy. The leather chair felt different than it had just months ago. Back then, I sat halfway down the table, taking notes, pitching ideas, waiting for approval. Now 20 pairs of eyes watched me instead. Waiting. Me. The agenda was brutal. Declining quarterly numbers, a pending acquisition that could either double our valuation or destroy us, and a senior executive threatening resignation if his authority was undermined again. Pressure. Exposure. Just like the beach. I remembered the sun on my skin, the vulnerability, the quiet strength it took to stand still and answer honestly. "Let's begin," I said calmly. The discussion turned tense quickly. Investors questioned strategy. One board member implied I was elevated too quickly. Another suggested bringing in an experienced interim advisor. A year ago, those words would have shaken me. Today, they clarified me. "I understand your concerns," I said evenly. "But growth doesn't come from safe decisions. It comes from intelligent risk." The room quieted. I outlined the acquisition strategy in detail, the cultural alignment, the long-term integration plan, the projected 3-year upside rather than short-term optics. I didn't oversell. I didn't defend emotionally. I stayed steady. When the meeting ended, the vote passed. Narrowly, but it passed. As the board members filtered out, I felt it again, that strange mix of exposure and clarity. Leadership wasn't about dominating the room. It was about holding it steady when doubt tried to fracture it. That evening, I found her standing on the balcony outside the executive lounge. She no longer held authority and title, but her presence still shifted the air. "You didn't flinch," she said without turning around. "I learned from the best," I replied. She smiled faintly. "Did you?" There was a pause. "You don't need me anymore," she added. The words hit unexpectedly. For months she had been mentor, critic, strategist, the architect behind my growth. And now there was distance in her voice. "I never needed you to stand," she clarified. "I needed you to realize you could." The wind carried the city noise upward. Below us, employees left the building, unaware of how fragile and powerful their company's future truly was. "Why the beach?" I asked quietly. "Out of every way to test someone, why that?" She finally turned toward me. "Because the world strips you eventually," she said. "It takes comfort, titles, illusions. I wanted to see if you'd hold your composure before the world forced you to." I thought about that, about the countless leaders who collapse when image cracks, about how close I had been to walking away that day. "Were you ever unsure about me?" I asked. She didn't hesitate. "Yes, honesty, always sharp, always clean. But uncertainty isn't weakness," she continued. "It's data. You proved consistency under pressure. That's rarer than talent." We stood in silence for a long moment. Then she did something unexpected. She handed me a folder. Inside were documents, expansion plans, global partnership outlines, strategies that stretched 5 years beyond anything we had discussed publicly. "You're thinking too small," she said. My eyes scanned the projections. International scaling, sustainable tech investment, education initiatives. "This is bigger than revenue," I said slowly. "It was always bigger than revenue," she replied. "But I built survival. You have the opportunity to build legacy." The word lingered. Legacy. The next 6 months became a storm of transformation. We closed the acquisition successfully, integrated teams without mass layoffs, shifted company culture from high-pressure fear to high-performance trust. Employee retention improved. Innovation spiked. Investors stabilized. But the real shift was internal. I stopped leading to prove something. I started leading to build something. One evening, long after she had fully stepped away from daily involvement, I returned to the same beach alone. The shoreline looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I had grown. I stood there, feeling the wind against my skin again. This time not exposed, not uncertain, but aware. That day had never been about obedience. It had been about identity, about whether I would crumble under discomfort or expand because of it. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Company valuation reaches record high under new leadership. I stared at the horizon. Success felt quieter than I imagined. Stronger too. As the sun dipped below the water, I realized something powerful. Leadership isn't about the moment you're chosen. It's about the moments you choose not to quit. And sometimes, the most uncomfortable chapters of your life become the foundation of everything you build afterward. If this story has shown you that resilience shapes destiny, that growth lives on the other side of discomfort, then don't just watch silently. Subscribe to the channel, because the next story might be the one that reminds you who you're capable of becoming. And trust me, The best transformations always begin where comfort ends.